Aufnahme. And hello and welcome to the Friday night stream of the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel, where we learned from our mistakes and now actually have a quick look at the videos we're going to react to before we go live with them and put everybody to sleep, as I did last week with the video from the Center for Political Insomniacs. So there you are. Pro tip that I learned actually from that experience on Saturday: if you find yourself commenting, critiquing the structure of the presentation of the video that you're meant to be dunking on, that means you have completely run out of things to talk about, and you should probably get another video. I have learned from this mistake, and I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to what the videos are before I put them up so that they aren't completely dull as shit. And now, having said that, let's play a little bit of Rapid as we get started. Oh hell, I forgot my water. I'll be right back. There. Hydration is ensured now. Oh, and I almost had the game aboard on me because of that. Hi, how are you? Something weird's going on with my headphones. Okay. And how's my audio, by the way? Okay, that was not one of my best decisions there. Okay, now I've actually got stereo in my headphones. It's find it weird when I can only actually hear out of one. Okay, I've buggered this up fairly well. Okay. Is there any way to get out of this? I really don't think there is. So, damage control. Okay, what are we doing here? Actually, not too. Considering that absolute cock up earlier, I seem to be doing reasonably well. Only down 2 pawns of material. Okay. Oh shit, I could have forked the rooks. And instead I hung a bishop. Okay, this could have gotten off to a better start, I suppose. How's my audio? Are you hearing me okay? Oh, good. Oh, hey, Phoenix Rising. Good to see you again. What's for dinner? Oh, shit. Okay, that's made in one. Yes, that game could have gone better. GG. Ah, good. Play one more of those. Hopefully a little bit less disastrously. And this time I have actually decided to do a bit of auditioning of videos I'm thinking of reacting to. So you weren't. I don't know if you were here for last week's. Oh no, I meant. Well, Andromeda Echo. I meant. Oh, but that sounds rather nice. I just had a pizza. Oh, of course she did. I mean, she's really just sort of a great source of the relatively trivial bad take. Although the one where she called the 3 non-trans actors showing up in front of J.K. Rowling's house a disgrace to the trans community, as if her address wasn't one of the best known addresses in all of Scotland. That was a pretty impressive one. Yeah, you missed last week, but you didn't miss much. On Saturday, I decided to do one of these long seminars from Caleb Muppett's Center for Political Innovation, and it was the most boring shit ever. It was just, it was the Center for Political Insomnia. So, since then I've decided to actually look into what I'm considering reacting to in advance of putting it on and hoping that it's going to get good eventually. I mean, lots of things take on the flavor of any seasoning. I mean, tofu. If you if it isn't good, you probably haven't cooked it well. I mean, in North America, I would say there are places where I would say if you didn't like it, you probably just don't like it, because there's a better than average chance of it actually being cooked properly. But in North America, if you didn't like it, chances are you had it from somebody who didn't know how to cook it, which is most people who make it in the US or Canada. There's lots of disrespecting of tofu amongst the cooks of tofu. I mean, Jamie Oliver, for example, clearly doesn't know what the hell he's doing with it. Okay, are we trading dark squared bishops, Zenbound? Terra Torment, you're new here. How'd you find us, if you don't mind my asking? Oh, well, the thing is that he's also an asshole in ways that can be... God, Peter Coffin... There was a time when I actually rated Peter Coffin. Peter Coffin seemed to be decent, but then... Then they started deciding to be as all anti-woke, and then at one point had to be shamed out of sharing a platform with a bunch of literal white nationalists. And, well, to their credit, unlike Caleb Maupin, they could actually be shamed out of it. Okay, I know who you are then. I'm always curious if it's somebody who's actually sort of randomly found this stream, or if it's somebody who... Oh, hell, okay, fuck that one up. Somebody I gave the link to. Well, I'm honored that you made an exception for me. Okay. Zenbound is up basically up a piece. And I don't really like the location of that knight on d4. That's going to be a bit annoying. Let's see, what can I do here? And I have no dark squared bishop, so I can't threaten it that way. Oh, we can trade. And with, like, ContraPoints, I try to like ContraPoints. Because I keep on having people say, oh, give her another chance or whatever, and each time she says something really fucked up, or either it's just like a cursed liberal take, or it's actually worse than that. And it's like, no, I mean, I appreciate the pageantry, but, God, I'm not really keen on her politics. Okay, let's double up here. Okay, now I can perhaps get something going. So I can... Now the E7 square is freed up. And I can check... I mean, that doesn't really give me anything just now, but... potentially, at some point, that might be useful. Oh, thank you. That's more than I could have asked for. I didn't, when I said it would be useful eventually, I did not mean that Zenbound was gonna hang their queen. I mean, I'm very happy that they did that. And now I'm back in this. Okay, let's avoid having any linked pawns that might eventually pass. And let's see. Oh, okay. This just became very easy. I can just go here and it's a background mate. Unless Zenbound notices that and pushes one of those two pawns in front of the king. E.g. Okay. Admittedly, my knight is a bit trapped now. Oh! Free pawn, thank you. Well, the video we're going to be bowling bouncers to tonight, I can just let you in on this in advance, actually has the coffin and the Muppet. Which sounds like a really weird Agatha Christie novel. Or like something Edgar Allan Poe might have written when he was really off his face. Ooh, okay, and resigned, GG, yes, because I was about to fork those rooks, and then I was definitely winning this. This is why I don't resign. I fucked up a couple of times quite seriously in there, but as long as there's some chance of winning, and there still was, I like to stay in it, unless it's going to be really, really boring for viewers. And then I will occasionally bite the bullet and resign, but I don't like to. Okay. And now, let us move on. Okay, where is it? Yes. I give you the Muppet and the Coffin in BreadTube lies about fascism. We need a scientific Marxist understanding. Brought to you by the guy who, well, there's Caleb Muppet who proudly sucked up to a bunch of Russian and French fascists in Moscow a few years ago and felt absolutely no reason not to advertise that fact on his YouTube channel. And Peter Coffin, who was going to share a platform that was almost entirely fash until people shamed them out of it. So, yes, these are the people who can give us a scientific understanding, a scientific Marxist understanding, no less, of fascism. Not sure who Ms. ACD PhDC is. I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. What we do know is that her standards are low enough to be sharing a platform with these two twats. So here we go.
Let's talk a little bit about how BreadTube defines fascism.
Yes, okay. This is we already tell it's going to be good.
Sure. Well, among Marxists, you generally have three definitions of fascism. The first definition is that fascism is, conservative, extreme right. Basically, Republicans get more conservative.
Oh, you're right. Okay, yes.
And then generally that's
Yeah, hold on. I'll back this up. I have it low when it's music so you can hear me better. And I forgot to turn it back up for chuds. So here we go. This should be better. Let me know if it isn't.
Fascism.
Sure. Well, among Marxists, you generally have three definitions of fascism. The first definition is that fascism is, conservative, extreme right wing. So basically, Republicans get more conservative, more authoritarian, they become fascists. And then generally that's the justification for voting for the Democrats, because at least they're not fascists, right? That's the first one. That's pretty standard. You get that from, from Social Democrats, from the Communist Party, and some others, right? Then the second definition comes from Trotskyites, and they generally argue that fascism is a mass movement of the middle class that is against big corporations, but also against the labor movement and the working class. And then the third definition is kind of a strange one. It comes out of...
And I have to say, okay, that first one I've heard versions of, although mostly from liberals, not really from people that you'd call Marxists or would call themselves Marxists. That second one is missing bits. It is not really what I hear amongst Trotskyists too much. It's, it's like some of that fits into what Trotskyists I know and have been exposed to in various places would say, but it's missing key bits.
Some of the Maoists use it. It was used in the early 1930s by the communists, where they say fascism is like it's like a capitalist attempt to imitate socialism. It's social fascism, right? But all three.
Okay, that's not what social fascism is, though. Okay, so these are the three definitions, and the most common one I hear, particularly amongst my circles, which are like anarchists, Trotskyists, a few Maoists, and a whole bunch of left comms, is capitalism in crisis, when it takes the techniques of control that it is, developed in colonization and brings them back home. Although since both of these two, I don't know about Miss ACD PhDC, never heard of her. We'll find out soon enough, are fairly shit on the subject of colonization. I suppose they wouldn't want to talk about that definition, but I mean, it's kind of a bit odd not to mention that one because it's a fairly widespread definition and it makes a lot of sense. Fascism is what, capitalists start backing when they're afraid of what the working class is going to do next, or they're afraid of losing control.
Three of those definitions really don't get to the essence of what fascism is. Fascism is basically when there is...
Oh, it's still a bit quiet. I'll turn it up a bit more then. Let me know if it's any...
It's a capitalist economic crisis. The capitalists, one faction of the capitalists, will take control of the state and utilize it to try and solve the economic crisis with mass destruction, violence, and terror. And it is an
which is interesting because this is actually, I was just saying, this is like the main definition, and of course, he attributes all of these, in various ways, inadequate definitions to everybody else, but he's the one who brings this one up. Of course, he's not... I wonder if he's going to tell us, he's going to analyze how Dugin and his big money backing in Russia actually fits into this idea.
Outgrowth of capitalism and an economic system, right? Germany, economic crisis, communist uprisings going on. So, Krupp and Tyson and a banker named Hollimer Schacht, they met with Hitler and they said, "You're our guy."
Hollimer, to rhyme with polymer, it's Hjalmar.
And they put Hitler in power, and he put half the country in concentration camps and half the country in military uniforms, and he refused to pay back the debts to the Americans, and he stabilized the economy for a few years, and then they had to have World War II in order to keep the war machine rolling ahead, and the rest is history. Italian fascism is a similar story. In Chile, you had Pinochet come in, and that fascism is about one faction of the ruling class seizing power and engaging in mass terror and destruction to try and stave off an economic crisis. And
which is really odd because Pinochet was not really one faction of the ruling class. Pretty much the entire ruling class was behind him in Chile. And also, kind of a key aspect of it is that, very crucially, the CIA was behind him. In fact, although the thing about Pinochet is he showed up in he was completely uncommitted to any of it until the eve of the planned coup. He actually was basically sticking his finger out, finding out which the way the wind blows up until then. They weren't counting on him, but the minute he actually joined, he insisted on taking over this whole thing that he hadn't had any involvement in planning. And then he wrote an autobiography called El Día Decisivo, where he claimed to be, the first person to have the idea of having a coup, and it was just complete bullshit. And interestingly, all the people who, quite a few of the people who had been involved in plotting the coup from the start in the military, ended up dying through various times in the 1980s, often after pointing out how full of shit he was.
The best understanding of fascism that I've ever heard comes from R. Palm Dutt. R. Palm Dutt was a leader of the British Communist Party in the 1930s. He wrote a very, very important book called Fascism and Social Revolution, published in 1934. But you can also read the writings of Georgy Dimitrov, who was the leader of the Communist International. And he was somebody who the Nazis had arrested and charged him with burning the Reichstag, and he was able to do his own defense in the court and was eventually freed and returned to the Soviet Union. It's kind of a miracle. I mean, he was a real...
It wasn't so much of a miracle because in that particular trial, that was like the last time a court in Nazi Germany actually was worried about how things would look. They were worried about optics, so they actually did try to make it look good. And it turned out Dimitrov and the other Bulgarians, the evidence that was linking them was such crude forgeries that even the judge had to... even the judge had to admit it, and the Attorney General, who was reporting directly to Hitler the whole time, dismissed the charges, which he only would have done in consultation with Hitler, because it just looked so ridiculous, and they were still trying to get some level of international legitimacy.
Anti-fascist hero. He was the leader of Bulgaria after the Second World War. Georgy Dimitrov, and he talked about fascism.
Can you hear it okay now?
As well. You can read the writings of many of the great anti-fascist fighters in the 1930s, folks who fought in Spain against Franco and all of that.
You see, it's interesting. I always find it interesting when people decide not to sort of cut off the definition of fascism in about 1945 and not look how fascist movements have developed since then. I find it particularly interesting when there are people who actually have had a very, very close hands-on experience with how fascist movements have developed since 1945 because they're closely associated with them.
This is how they understood fascism. Fascism was an outgrowth of capitalism in decay, and that the ideology it doesn't matter. It's not about, fascism isn't about what you say, it's about what you do, right? Mussolini
this is really interesting, because other times when he's talked about why it's just so wrong to be like looking at fascist dog whistles and stuff, it's all about the ideology totally matters, and you're only a fascist if you're a member of a group that calls itself fascist. Like his explanation, he says that even Dugin is not a Nazbol because he left the Nazbol party, and so now he's no longer a Nazbol. What the fun thing about that is that apparently the Nazbol party seems to have moved left after Dugin left and started the Eurasian movement, which Muppet has sucked up to a few times. Yeah. So yeah, very interesting. Now he's saying that the ideology doesn't matter, which I actually agree with. Their fascism is opportunistic, but so is fucking Caleb Muppet, because this is not the view he's taken on other occasions.
It's like weird sci-fi futurist thing. But what did he do when he came into power? Mass destruction and terror to stabilize capitalism. Hitler, it was all about knights and castles and Germans and anti-Semitism and Wagner. But what did he do when he came in? Mass violence and terror in an attempt to stabilize capitalism.
Anti-Semitism and Wagner.
Fascism sounds different everywhere. It always has a different kind of thing. But fascism is about what you do. It's not about what you say. And there are instances where fascists sound like they might be communists. I don't know.
It's true. That tell us more, Caleb. Where could you give us an example of a fascist who sometimes sounds like he might be a communist, but really, really fucking isn't? I mean, I'm just interested if you could, just off the top of your head, name somebody who's like that.
You may have seen, there's an old episode of Superman, where Superman has a bit of a problem because there's this bad guy who puts on a Superman costume and is going around doing all these bad things. And
then he founds the Center for Krypton Innovation.
Superman is like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But the thing is, that guy might wear the Superman costume, but what he does is the exact opposite of what Superman does. Fascists might talk against big corporations. Fascists might sound like they're against the system.
Or international bankers, say. What, I'd love to hear Caleb put on a Superman suit? Or name an example of a fascist who kind of sounds communist sometimes. I mean, I don't think he could dress more asininely
but what they do is engage in mass violence and terror and destruction in order to stabilize capitalism. That's the essence of fascism.
Yeah, sometimes they sound like a respected anti-imperialist intellectual. Can you help me out, Caleb, who that might be? He's the one you keep calling a respected anti-imperialist intellectual who can't possibly be a Nazbol because he's not in the Nazbol party.
And the bread tube crowd has made fascism into an aesthetic. Fascism is a type of clothes people wear. It's
fuck off. No. See, okay. What they've done, what people have done now, his definition of bread tube, I have to say, is buck wild. He puts people in there who are declared enemies of BreadTube. He puts, like, Destiny in there. He has some guy I've never heard of, nobody seemed to have heard of, who he claims, based on no evidence, is the puppet master of BreadTube. I mean, and in his book, he also claims that Thought Slime is a channel dedicated exclusively to self-harm and scat. I mean, seriously, he literally says this. Before saying a bunch of shit about Thought Slime's mother that he also doesn't back up with anything. Yeah. So, but, I mean, it's like, what people are talking about there is the fascist aesthetic. It's not reducing fascism to the aesthetic, Caleb. It is talking about the aesthetic fascists use, because they use an aesthetic to fucking, distinguish themselves without actually openly admitting to what they are in company that wouldn't necessarily be entirely accepting. So yeah, we talk about their style, we talk about their terminology, you talk about all those things because it's called dog whistling, and you have to know what it actually is. If you're going to identify them, because they try to be sly about it. They, like sometimes you'll have fascists who will try to lecture you condescendingly about communism. And how you really need to wear a suit because that's what SEIU full-timers do, and that's what real revolutionaries do, is what SEIU full-timers do.
It's a tone of voice people use. and it has nothing to do with this scientific Marxist understanding of what fascism actually is. And they make
Yeah, and it doesn't claim to be a discussion of what fascism is. It is a discussion of how you can identify them, what they look like, what their fucking symbolism is. God.
make it all about the window dressing, all about the symbols, all about the hand gestures, and not about the essence of what fascism is.
Well, yeah, because the point is that that fascists these days kind of like to hide it, and have bland names like Center for Political Innovation and stuff like that. What's funny is elsewhere, his argument is not that it's superficial to talk about, the fascist aesthetic. That he says that it's just nonsense. You can't, identify fascists just based on, symbols and clothes and characteristic hand gestures and salutes and all this stuff. I mean, and now he's just saying it's superficial when, God. Fucking God.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I think in this bread tube crowd, that a fascist is an individual. It's an individual working class person who maybe...
Yeah, I'd love to see a citation for that. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, this is a thing that you get a lot with Moppet and his mob, is that they try to associate fascism and the working class all the time. I mean, never mind an actual class analysis of who's in these fascist groups. They find ways to sort of insinuate a connection there where there really isn't one, or they try to claim that other people are attributing it in order to suggest that being against fascism is against the working class. This stuff is so transparent.
Doesn't know everything about trans people, maybe accidentally misgenders someone, maybe...
Yeah, I'd love to see an example. Yeah, where exactly? Who has said that a fascist is someone who maybe accidentally misgenders somebody sometime? Please, we're going to get a cite on that, aren't we?
Is a conservative libertarian, and that's kind of what they see fascism is.
No, what they point out is that the people who call themselves libertarians in the US hang out quite openly with fascists, which isn't all that surprising, since the right-wing libertarianism, when they appropriated that term, it really originated very much as two things. One was as a lobbying vehicle for the real estate sector, and the other thing was just in opposition to the civil rights movement.
I've noticed among a lot of liberals, especially since Trump took office, this narrative has gone out that the problem is that there is this vast secret Nazi conspiracy that has infiltrated the American government. And
this is the bullshit that he keeps on saying in his book too, that it's a secret Nazi conspiracy. Nobody's saying it's secret. They're being very open about it. They're being fucking open about it. Nobody's saying that it's secret. It's easier to dismiss if you make it about a vast secret Nazi conspiracy. But
our job as good liberals and leftists is to help the good capitalists like Biden purge this vast secret Nazi conspiracy from the government, and then everything will be okay.
Yeah, I mean, and see, the thing is, and now in this case, he allows how that might be what liberals are saying. I don't think it's exactly accurate description of what I've heard most liberals saying, but I mean, he's previously suggested that that's what leftists were saying, that this was a matter, that anti-fascism was a matter of helping the good capitalists purge the bad ones, and of course based on fucking nothing.
Well, first of all, I don't think that there's necessarily a vast Nazi conspiracy. I think some capitalists like Betsy DeVos and like Bernie Marcus and like Trump and the frackers are using people with alt-right perspectives as their foot soldiers, number one. But number two...
Okay, see what he's doing here. I love this. This is like... it's like some sort of weird, sort of large-scale mansplain where you sort of dismiss the thing that you attribute some bullshit to other people who you're trying to dismiss, and then the thing that they're actually saying, you correct them by saying that, even though it is in fact what they just got done saying.
Two, even if there was a vast purge and every right-wing person was taken out of the government, it wouldn't resolve all the problems of capitalism, right?
Exactly.
The problem is not this vast crypto-Nazi secret plot,
It kind of depends. First of all, I mean, let's just leave aside the secret plot. But the thing is, yeah, I mean, I would say that, fascism isn't a problem for Caleb Muppet. And fascism's only a problem for Peter Coffin to the extent that occasionally they've gotten embarrassed by their willingness to share platforms with them. But, there are some people for whom fascist paramilitaries feeling comfortable walking around in the streets and getting helped out by the cops is actually kind of a serious issue that has to be dealt with. But, yes, I believe that's what Caleb calls cancel culture when they try to deal with it.
The problem is capitalism. And that, oddly, this kind of weird
he totally is. That's all he does.
I know Spike Lee pushed it in his movie Black Klansman, which I liked. It was a good movie, but that was kind of the message you got from it.
Okay. I'm not really surprised that he liked a movie that tried to make a cop the hero of the struggle against the Klan. A cop whose main thing in his career was snitching on the Black Panthers and other black radical movements of the time. And that actually, despite claiming to be a historical film, created a fictitious bomb plot just for this cop to be the one to defuse it. I mean, there was... Boots Riley did a whole thing where he, an article of when it came out, pointing out just what complete bullshit this was based on what we know about the guy who is the hero of the piece, the actual guy. I forget who his name was, but I mean, if you search Boots Riley Black Klansman, you'll find it. But I'm not really surprised to find Caleb Muppet announcing that he liked a movie that was just basically propaganda.
I mean, it kind of mimics anti-Semitism, right? Because what is anti-Semitism? It's the idea, well, there's not a problem with...
Well, I mean, if, Caleb knows a lot about anti-Semitism. He wrote a whole book where it was basically sort of, here, check out this dodgy rich person. Oh, by the way, they're Jewish. Like, I mean, he makes a point of telling us repeatedly in this book that Ayn Rand is Jewish. Like, apropos of fucking nothing. I mean, and then he, of course he craps on about the international bankers and all this shit. Yes.
Capitalism or imperialism, if the problem is just the Jews. And if we just get rid of the Jews, we purge out the Jews, everything will be okay. Well, it's not scientific, right? And that this narrative that there's just this vast secret alt-right plot,
which is a narrative he's just made up.
I criticize specifically in the book ContraPoint's video, How to Spot a Fascist, because
because it gives the game away. But, I mean, I love he spent, like, what is this, like 6 minutes, most of it on a narrative, an anti-fascist narrative that he made up, specifically for the purpose of fucking making anti-fascists look ridiculous.
She's probably the best and most articulate RedTube voice.
First of all, I never would have guessed that she was part of BreadTube. I mean, but then he just keeps adding anyone that he wants to dismiss. I mean, I'd always thought, given that the word bread is in there, that we were talking about people who had some kind of an anarchist perspective or something, some kind of affinity to that, e.g. Thought Slime or something like that. But, I mean, he, puts in right-wingers like Destiny who stand Kyle fucking Rittenhouse. And liberals like ContraPoints, who's funny. He stands ContraPoints here when we were just talking about ContraPoints just a few minutes ago. That's cute. That's good timing. This is much better than that last one. You didn't miss anything, those of you who weren't there for it.
She's probably the only one that seems to actually, take the job of deprogramming the alt-right seriously and actually...
Well, the thing is, most of them don't actually see that as the fucking job.
Try to find out what these people believe and counter it. But her video, How to Spot a Fascist, it's beneath her. She could do better than that. And the whole video is about...
Oh, God, yes. Oh, I mean, how will she ever live down Caleb having disappointed Caleb Muppet? I mean, it's beneath her.
how basically there's a group of people that have a very, very specific worldview, and that would be like Richard Spencer, white nationalist kind of people. And that there is a whole bunch of secret, people like that within the government and on the internet. And here's all the secret code signs to look for, and you can.
Yes, because these things, it's called dog whistling, you dickhead. It's like when people go around and can't shut up about international bankers when they're supposed to be giving you an analysis of capitalism. Yeah, that's... let's see. The thing about fascism is it's changed since 1945, Caleb. That now they have a bit of a reputation problem that they need to live down. And so they start out with all sorts of other shit, and you find out, and because it's all about the third position strategy and less explicit kinsman and all this other bullshit, that these are the words they use. I mean, I like how he acts like this is some sort of conspiracy theory when we have the Daily Stormer's style guide. We've had it for I think that came out 3 years ago. The whole thing got leaked, where they detail, in just total detail, exactly what their media strategy is to speak to outright Nazis while at the same time not alienating somebody who isn't already totally within, hasn't totally bought into that. I mean, this is stuff they talk about fairly openly amongst themselves. They don't do much of a job of hiding themselves for the most part. So, I mean, acting like this is some weird conspiracy theory is just so ridiculous.
Find them, and it almost sounds like the John Birch Society. You remember there was a bunch of secret communists taking over the government, and it was just kind of bizarre. There are millions of Americans that are confused. Millions of Americans voted for Donald Trump. Not all of them are part of this secret, vast white nationalist conspiracy plot.
But judging from the polling information we have, first of all, fuck off with the secret plot thing. But one of the overwhelming ideological commonalities amongst Trump voters that first time out in particular turned out to be that they were very preoccupied with what the survey question termed as white identity. The other thing was that they made nearly twice the national median income. I mean, no, actually more than twice the national median income. Their median income was double, maybe a little bit more than double that. But yeah, I mean, racism was a major factor in people voting for the guy who was the most explicit racist on the fucking ballot. Yeah,
a lot of them are just taken in by right-wing ideas. And if your response to all of them is to shout, Nazi, Nazi, you're not going to win any of them over. You're not going to be very effective.
And who's doing that exactly?
At the end of the day. And I also...
whereas if you share a platform with them and try to get them into the international bankers and tell them that actually all the actual leftists are either deluded or weird sort of degenerate types who talk about nothing but self-harm and scat, well, that's an interesting way to win them over, certainly.
Also notice there's a huge double standard. Joe Biden has made an endless amount of racial gaffes, but no...
Racial gaffes? They don't racial gaff. Fuck off, racial gaffes. He said a whole bunch of racist shit. I mean... Yeah, nobody... I mean... It's funny, what he's about to say, he's trying to say that there's this double standard, that leftists weren't criticizing what a fucking asshole on so many different levels Joe Biden is, which is already bullshit, but he can't even bring himself to do it, because to acknowledge that what Biden says is racist, that he says extremely racist things, and he's got a long history of it, because he basically got into politics to oppose the fucking civil rights movement, to roll it back, and his closest associates for the half century he was in Congress, nearly, were people like Strom Thurmond and fucking Trent Lott and Jesse Helms and the fucking segregation, the outright Jim Crow old guard of the Republican Party. I mean, racial gaffes. What the fuck?
Nobody claims that Vosh is a secret Nazi for urging people to vote for Joe Biden.
No, but people have pointed out that he stands Nazis and is actually nicer to them than he is to leftists, and that he's kind of seriously fucking racist and uses white nationalist talking points. Some of us have pointed that out. And also, here's the thing. There's a difference between being in a neo-Nazi organization or standing somebody who openly gives shout-outs to fascist paramilitary groups, and supporting a candidate that most people voted for just because they wanted to get rid of fucking Trump. I mean, the most hilarious thing in Biden's campaign was how he claimed that people voted for him because they like him for who he is, when basically his whole campaign slogan, as far as anyone ever saw it, was, yes, Joe Biden's a piece of shit, but can we please get rid of Trump? Make it please stop. We'll take anything, even this complete asshole, who was extremely unpopular until he had basically a complete rort in the fucking primary, because he was so right-wing and racist and, also a rapist.
I never. I mean, the same for a lot of Democrats, right? I mean, Hillary Clinton even talked about super predators and stuff.
Yes, and the left. The left spent 4 years getting shat on by liberals and blamed for Trump because they pointed out that Hillary Clinton said racist shit like super predators. I mean, he's gonna pretend that I see. This is such a standard thing that I find, like, on social media, when somebody's like standing fash or wants to avoid anyone talking about fash or criticizing them, they'll immediately start claiming that the left all support Joe Biden or something like that. They'll be like, oh yeah, but what about Joe Biden? And it's like, nobody was defending Joe Biden. Pretty much everyone in this fucking conversation hates Joe Biden. Why are you suddenly changing the subject to him? Yeah, fuck him, but that's not what we're fucking talking about.
Absolutely.
And somehow this weird conspiracy theory, it's like the Da Vinci Code or something, right? We're going to piece together the secret signs and find out who is part of the vast fascist Illuminati cabal. I mean, it's like, this isn't politics. This is silliness almost.
Well, yeah, I know. Then why did you? It's so silly. You shouldn't have made it up in the first place.
It's theater. It's, the way that I always kind of thought of it, and that you said, DeVos, Trump, the frackers, they're benefiting from this. Capital is laughing its way to the bank. It's the barbarians fighting each other. I always compared, like, around 2016, Trump, using people of color or immigrants or whomever as a scapegoat for, like, rural white working class people, like a modern day.
Okay, it is several years past the expiry date of this claim that it was working class white people who put him in the it was, well, the economically distressed white people or whatever who put him into office. The people who put him into office were actually better off than both the people who voted for Clinton and the winners of that election, the people who didn't vote. I mean, this is something liberals do too, where they'll be like, oh, I mean, in the most disgusting thing too, because they'll point out some really, really poor county that went for Trump, and there'll be like horrible shit happening to poor people there because that's kind of just, that's this country, that's capitalism, and they'll be like, oh, serves them right for voting for Trump, and they most likely didn't, because the thing is that the people in that income bracket almost never vote, and when they do, it's for Democrats. You would be the people who voted in those, just because the county is full of poor people doesn't mean that's who fucking voted. There's pretty much any county you find or any district or whatever, electoral subunit, whatever, it can have all sorts of poor people in it, but the people who are voting are the ones who are better off than most of them.
Bacon's rebellion of, like, this psychological wage imparted on a specific group, and then working to divide the working class while everybody's just benefiting from this. And leftists and breadtubers subscribing to this narrative is so harmful because it's doing the same thing.
The narrative that it's a bad thing when fascist paramilitaries go around terrorizing communities, and that we should probably stop that. That just because the ruling class decides to actually bankroll some of these groups, which is why you will see a lot of the same faces at fash rallies on both coasts and in between, because people were literally flying into these things in order to make up the numbers, because it was actually so fucking, and is actually, I mean, they're doing well if they manage 100 people. But a lot of them are actually just people who fly from one end of the country to the next to go to these things. They somehow manage to cover these costs. Their crowdfunders just utterly run over. I mean, yes, Richard Spencer's in some bother now. Let's face it, he's fucking buggered, to be honest. But a lot of them aren't. He had the mistake. He made the mistake of becoming really famous and then very famously getting cold cocked on camera, and being associated with the Charlottesville pogrom in a very prominent way. The people who weren't so prominent have managed to get away with it fairly well and are actually very well funded. I mean, yes, just because fascists are funded by the ruling class in order to try to divide the working class doesn't mean you don't fight them. That's why you fight them, Caleb.
It's extremely dangerous. You know, if you say that the pie can only be this big,
Hey, Abby!
the only way...
Oh, it's good to see you on here. Oh, how have you been?
your slice gets any bigger is if you cut into somebody else's slice, right? That's the only way. If the pie can only be this big, and no one ever thinks their slice of the pie is big enough, right?
And most people's literally just isn't.
You know, there's an old device they called a whipsaw. You know, it's very archaic. We don't use that anymore. But it was a saw that had two handles on. And when one guy was pushing, the other guy was pulling. When the other guy was pulling, the other guy was pushing, right? It was a whipsaw. And really, in a time like this, that's kind of what they're doing. They've convinced one section of the population that they can only gain at the expense of the other section. They've convinced the other section that they can only gain at the expense of the other section.
Oh, God, yeah, I like how this analysis of fascist. He's just okay. So on these fascist groups, you could get the idea that they don't really do anything other than say hang out with Alexander Dugin, and then lecture people condescendingly about Marxism, and then get it wrong in important ways. But yeah, actually, kind of fascists are sort of doing shit as well. They have this habit of committing attempted murder fairly regularly at every one of their fucking rallies. Yeah, so maybe people actually do have a good reason why they want to keep these fuckers out of their community, and it isn't just that they're trying to. They think that their slice of the pie is being eaten up by fascists, though. Actually, given how well off fascists tend to be, relatively speaking, yeah, probably actually part of it is. But yeah, maybe we should talk about that if we're going to talk about fascism. It's interesting how fascists get a pretty mild going over for Caleb
And
Muppet.
basically, we're pushing and pulling on each other while the capitalists sit back there and laugh. And at the end of the day, if you declare the pie to only be this big, you're trapped. Marxism says the pie can be unlimited if we just get beyond the irrationality of profits, right? That there is no limit to human growth and creativity. There's a limit to the irrational system of production for profits, right? And if we can get beyond...
Yeah, and okay, so how are you going to get rid of the capitalist class and overcome the capitalist system of production without fighting the capitalist class's own fucking attack dogs, the cops and the fash? And the military in some cases? I mean, you're gonna kind of have to deal with those people because that's who's sent out to stop you winning. But then he has very weird ideas about how you get to communism, which basically amount to a massive speed up increase of worker productivity that just somehow magically transforms the economy because somehow eventually there becomes no way to derive an advantage from controlling the means of other people's survival, or it doesn't make any sense.
Beyond that, there is no real limit to human creativity and growth.
And that is an optimism that you don't generally see within, I mean, just the left as a whole nowadays, but particularly in BreadTube, because it's kind of committed to inculcating that kind of ideology ultimately. You see them beating people over the head with their own consumption, saying you need to change what.
Yeah, for example. I wonder, okay, I wonder, get ready, if you've got a drink handy, if, Caleb Muppet says something about Malthusianism, accusing people of Malthusianism for acknowledging that overproduction is a thing in capitalism, then we're all going to have a drink.
Change what you're doing with your own life as if demand just straightforwardly influences supply. That's not how things work. We know that they don't work the way that Thomas Malthus, for instance, said.
Oh, that was unexpected. I didn't expect Malthusianism to come from somebody other than the Muppet. That's not how this is supposed to work. I think he's a little bit annoyed because that's his thing.
How they work. You did a ton of really good work on Malthus in this book, and on Margaret Sanger as well.
Sure. Well, Margaret Sanger.
Oh God, yeah. He did a ton of good work on Malthus in this book. I mean, how at this point it is just that somebody would suck up to Caleb Muppet over what he said about Malthusianism when he's totally disgraced himself on that subject more than once. Where he goes back and forth between, on the one hand, dunking on leftists because acknowledging overproduction in capitalism is Malthusian, and then dunking on leftists because they supposedly don't acknowledge that overproduction in capitalism exists. I mean, for anyone even minimally familiar with Caleb Muppet's work to decide that that's the thing to compliment him on, I mean, that's like, I mean, I believe the term was used in one of the more recent Xanderhole segments we did, something to do with ball cupping, and I mean, again, that is like that is holy grailing the Muppet balls.
Sanger was a Marxist. She was wealthy. She was one of the main financial backers of the Socialist Party and the industrial workers of the world in New York City. But her main thing was that she was into sexual freedom. That she believed in sexual freedom. And communists and socialists, they believed in that. And she went.
And Caleb Muppet doesn't. In fact, he recently said, he actually said, if you're against abortion and gay marriage, I consider you a comrade. I might disagree with you, but I consider you a comrade. And it's like, might? Not I disagree with you. First of all, why? Why would you consider? Why would you consider somebody a comrade who's writing off more than half of the working class right there? I mean, unless you're not really interested in the working class and the self-liberation of the working class, which he kind of isn't. But God.
She fled the country, actually, based on, being charged for sending birth control through the mail and such. And she got to Britain. And, the Soviet Union, they had a socialist revolution. She went to the Soviet Union, and it wasn't the free love, free sex paradise she wanted it to be.
Which is actually, the thing is, if you look at the early, very first few years, there was quite a lot of that. The Bolsheviks actually cracked down on it, but they didn't crack down as hard as Stalin, his man. It's funny, he has this weird hierarchy. He attributes everything to Marx if he can. But it's like he'll take Stalin over Lenin and always Lenin over Marx, but he'll attribute everything to fucking Marx. But actually, if you look at the art of the Soviet Union in the first few years, there is all sorts of free love stuff and sexual exploration going on. I mean, it's really fascinating stuff. There are picture books that are just Soviet posters from this period on the subject of free love and birth control and all sorts. I mean, not birth control, but free love and it's sort of just generally sexual freedom. This was a thing, like through the early 20s as well. like the very early 20s is when it ended. But that was actually a thing very early on.
And she made friends with the Rockefellers and the Neo-Malthusian Society.
Oh,
and
there we
they
go.
agreed to pay for her promotion of birth control. And on that basis, she went from Marxism to Malthusianism. During the Great Depression, communists were leading protests demanding food and bread and jobs and housing. She was saying that the Great Depression happened because there's too many people in the world because of the
And the thing is, actually, unlike most of the people he claims say this, Margaret Sanger actually did say that shit. She sucked in a lot of ways. She said a lot of things that suck, and unlike everybody else he attributes this stuff to, she actually said this shit.
cruelty of charity. And she was hanging out with the Ku Klux Klan and other kind of folks and talking about the need to reduce the human population and saying some pretty explicitly racist things.
So hanging out with the far right, I guess what this means to Caleb Muppet is that she wasn't all bad.
And that, again, this is about economics, right? At the end of the day, it's not simply about libidinal release. It's not about getting your rage out. It's not about fulfilling your sexual desires. It's about constructing a rationally organized economy. But
I don't really want to hear about Caleb Muppet's sexual desires. I don't want to even imagine his sexual desires. It's just, like, you just know he shits diamonds.
if you take the economics out of it and you turn it into just this adolescent desire to get your rage and sexual tension out, it turns into something rather destructive. And I talk about the prevalence of occultism in kind of left-wing circles has a similar thing,
Where the fuck is this? He just says these things. He says these things so fucking casually. To these people who you would think, I mean, I don't know anything about Miss ACD Faduk, FPHDC, whoever the hell she is. But you would think Peter Coffin has been around enough to know better, but they all managed to keep a straight face. I mean, although she in the middle there, she can't even really look the camera in the eye, which, yeah, given some of the things she said, I would have trouble looking anyone in the eye saying that shit too. But God, yes. So the left is all about occultism and sexual release. Tell us more, Caleb.
Aleister Crowley, Marilyn Ferguson. Some of these folks, their focus is not on making the world.
Who the fuck is standing? What the Aleister Crowley? Like, where the hell is he? Is he just making this shit up?
Better. It's about having some kind of Armageddon apocalyptic explosion to make everything into balance. And that's the final chapter of the book talks about that.
As we were reading this, we were making a joke of, like, with Margaret Sanger's quotes and, like, how just, like, I didn't even know this about, like, the KKK and like, how explicitly racist. I mean, obviously, Malthusianism is inherently racist in itself, but just, like, how vocal she was about this. And so we were joking, like, how fast is it going to be until a bread tuber actually reads this and takes those quotes of Margaret Sanger?
We do not want the word to go out that we want.
Aleister Good Omens. I don't know that one. But, I mean, to talk about this Malthusianism thing as if they, we were making a joke of when BreadTube was going to just openly adopt it and everything, when BreadTube has totally humiliated himself on this exact subject. I mean, do they just avoid actually looking at any of the content created by the people they're talking about here?
Want to exterminate the N-word population.
And says, yeah, Caleb Maupin said this.
Caleb Maupin says this in BreadTube Serves Imperialism. You can find the quote.
Except no, that's the sort of thing that Caleb Muppet does. I mean, that is the sort of the way that Caleb Muppet deals with sources. He will accuse people of fucking being Malthusians no matter what they say. But, yeah, nobody has done that. Nobody has done that because there's so much buck wild bullshit in that book. A book that literally claims that Thought Slime is just nothing but scat and self-harm. That Yeah, that why the hell would you even have to make anything up in order to get content out of that bullshit? It is absolute buck wild shit. But yes, let's laugh about how dishonest BreadTube is after accusing them all of being Malthusians for understanding Marx better than Caleb Muppet.
Yeah, I mean, that's Margaret Sanger, and that's about as honest. I have not yet heard one honest critique of the book from a BreadTuber.
Well, it's all been the
Well, yeah, you probably haven't listened to any of them.
like secret CIA plot to murder communists. Like we've seen people saying like he claims that BreadTubers want to murder him, or he claims.
Okay, well, the most ironic thing, he keeps on talking about secret plots and attributing bullshit about secret plots to leftists. You know, the secret Nazi conspiracy or whatever. When his book literally has this idea, he says there is a literal conspiracy that literally the CIA is controlling BreadTube. He actually names the person who is supposedly controlling BreadTube, pulling the strings on behalf of the CIA. This is what his, based on absolutely nothing, he makes these accusations. That is literally the crux of his fucking book that they're talking about, and none of them feel any cognitive dissonance about him saying, yeah, specifically accusing people of making up huge, vast conspiracies who don't do that because making up huge, vast conspiracies actually is discrediting when his entire book is a vast conspiracy theory.
That BreadTube is a tool. It's like, no, that is not said in the book. Like, it's like the type of rhetoric that is used by BreadTubers does put communists in an unfavorable light. And with like the type of action that the BreadTubers actually push, which is a lot of this anti-fascist action, which is all.
Except that the funny thing about this, and I'm gonna wrap up this part. We're gonna come back to this tomorrow night, and do a little bit more, because this only goes till 1 a.m. and we've only got 8 minutes left, so I'm gonna do some rapid in the for the last 8 minutes. But I mean, actually, the anti-fascist stuff, particularly in the communities that have seen fascist mobilizations, actually really was a net gain for leftists' reputation in those communities. I need to turn this down again. I've got a new format now where I actually do segments of these videos and let them actually last over a period of months sometimes. Like the Xander Hole thing, actually, it was a hour and 48 minute Xander Hole video. We did like half an hour of it a week since I don't know, October, I think. Mm-hmm. So how is that project of yours going, Abby? I remember you saying you had a thing, that you had an idea that you were working on and stuff, and didn't really say a whole lot about it. But I've been curious ever since. How's that going? What Ah, shit, I didn't mean to do that. That should have been D3. Okay, we'll do this a bit differently. And it's not going to be a Botvinnik English anyway, since my C pawn's already been eaten up. 멈췄어지 않는다. Yeah, I can work with D4. I just like doing the Botvinnik English where it's C4, D3, E4, and I like pop a nice big old knight on D5 and can just dominate the board with it. Like, is this like a production company or something like that, or what is it exactly? What are you doing? And I'm glad to see something is working. I know you've had a fairly difficult few years, has been my impression. Hey, if you need somebody to do script editing or structural and developmental editing, or you want to you want to option the movie rights for the novel that I'm finishing and I'm going to be releasing in the next few months, hit me up. I've got stuff for you. I'm glad to hear it. Oh, hell. Timax did already move. Missed that. Yeah, I suppose it is, but I mean, there's so many, like, with streaming platforms and things like that as well, you could probably find all sorts of places you could place things. और आप कहाँ से चैट करते हो जयकांत? Okay, I need to blockade that. Don't need connected pawns strangling my king. That isn't very nice of them. Tori tori boleti हूँ. पर इंग्लिश तो बोल सकती हूँ. Ah, Allahabad. Yeah, I know it. I mean, I haven't been there, but I know the place name. Yes, this is true. I have sort of a really kind of absurd number of languages that I at least know some of. Very true. Okay. Now let's threaten mate. Okay, Timax. Okay, that's one way, I suppose, to... Okay, let's make sure that knight can't find a home on g4, because that would be a real pain in the hole. It's funny, I probably have a bit of a Dublin accent at the moment, because I'm very easily influenced phonetically, and I just got done watching... Yes, indeed. Which are your two, Jaikant? Urdu ke Hindi? Hindi ke Marathi? Yeah, I was watching actually a really cute show on Acorn called Finding Joy, a comedy set in Dublin, and it's clearly there's been accent bleed, which I mean that happens to me generally, but with Irish accents it's especially strong. Ah, well, Hindi and Urdu are so close you could say you got three. There are Scottish accents that I have trouble distinguishing from Irish. There was the publican at this pub that I went to a lot in Cardiff. Actually, for a while there was a Scottish fellow, but his accent, he didn't really trill his R's, and it ended up sounding very like Belfast. Oh, I'd love to. Actually, a good friend of mine is studying in Newfoundland now. After having trouble finding a way to get any kind of status in the US, she got invited to do a postgraduate studies at one of the universities there. I forget the name. Something landscapey in the name, but I forget what it was. But yeah, I've been wanting to go there. I've seen the... Okay, namaskar. I have to go pretty soon too. And in fact, I think I'm about to lose. All I've seen... Yeah, there we go. GG. Good timing. All I've seen is the St. John's Airport, which we had to refuel there on the way to Dublin a few years back. And we had to get off the plane. So I was in Newfoundland long enough to have a spook, which is my standard that allows me to say that I have been to every province in Canada. Not to a single one of the territories yet, but that'll come. Okay, and now I have to wrap up since it's 1 a.m. and people here are trying to sleep, but I will be back. Now this one, it's like Park Slope or something like that, I forget exactly. I'll have to ask her. But I will be back tomorrow at 11:30, and I'll be online for the next 5 or 6 hours probably. So let's continue this conversation on chat in a minute. And I will see everybody on this stream, the same spot, tomorrow at 11:30.